Hello friends. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. That helps the channel show more stories like this one. Now, quick question for you. Have you ever moved into a house that looked perfect on paper, but felt wrong the moment you stepped inside? You know the feeling. The silence that isn't peaceful, it's waiting. The little sounds that sound like someone else is moving around when no one should be. Tell me honestly, have you ever felt like your new home was listening to you? Like you shut the door and you weren't the only one left inside? Keep that thought in your head while we begin, because these stories are exactly about that moment when a family realized their fresh start had already been taken. When I first moved into Lot 43 of Willow Creek Estates, it felt like stepping into a painting that wasn't finished yet. The streets were paved, but half the houses were still skeletons of wood and wire. The rest were just dirt plots, marked by orange mesh fences and real estate signs that looked like gravestones. I told myself it would feel like home once more families moved in. But for the first 3 weeks, it was just me, a few construction crews, and miles of empty lots. Every morning at exactly 6:10 a.m., the gravel trucks started their parade. Engine growling, metal clanking, dust clouds rising through the cold Illinois air. That sound became my alarm clock. I'd wake up, brew coffee that tasted faintly like drywall dust, and stare out the kitchen window at the endless stretch of unfinished homes. At first, I liked the silence after the workers left. It was peaceful, until it wasn't. It was the 17th night after I'd moved in when I heard it. A slow, deliberate crunch on the gravel outside my bedroom window. Not the wind, not an animal. Too heavy, too intentional. At first, I thought it might be one of the workers checking something they left behind. But when I peeked through the narrow opening in the curtains, I froze. A woman stood just beyond my fence. She wasn't doing anything, not moving, not pacing, just standing there, her backlit outline framed by the weak light spilling from a distant street lamp. She wore a long, heavy coat that brushed the tops of her boots. Her hair looked soaked, dark strands plastered to her scalp. She didn't move, not for 5 minutes, not for 10. Her stillness was the kind that made my skin crawl, like when you expect something to jump, but it doesn't. I told myself, maybe she's lost. Maybe she's one of the new residents looking for an address. But that didn't explain why she was just standing there, facing my house, head slightly tilted up toward my bedroom window. After 15 agonizing minutes, I closed the curtains and climbed back into bed, heart pounding. I kept telling myself it was nothing. I even laughed about it the next morning. But when I stepped outside, the gravel where she had stood was pressed down, 2 perfect boot prints in the dirt. The following night, I stayed up late, laptop open on my bed, pretending to work. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard the same sound, gravel shifting under weight. When I looked, she was back. Same coat, same stillness, but closer this time. She stood about 10 feet from my window. I could see the faint reflection of her eyes catching the moonlight, dark and hollow, like she wasn't really looking at me, but through me. Her mouth was slightly open, enough that I could see the glint of her teeth. I watched her for nearly an hour. She never moved, never blinked, just stood there, her breath fogging faintly in the air. By 3 o'clock, she turned slowly and walked back toward the vacant lots, disappearing between piles of lumber and scaffolding. When I checked the gravel again that morning, there were more boot prints, this time in a slow, deliberate circle around my house. I called the police the next night, The responding officer, a young guy named Henderson, arrived just before dawn, yawning behind his flashlight. Probably one of the construction workers. Sometimes they cut through properties on their way out. He took a few notes and left. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe anyone. But the next morning, I found something new. Boot prints again, except this time, they went right up to every single window. Even the sliding glass door to the backyard. I started keeping the lights on at night. I couldn't stand the dark anymore. That Wednesday, the wind was sharp enough to sting. The plastic sheets covering unfinished houses whipped and snapped in the air like sails. I tried reading on the couch, but every sound made me flinch. At 2 a.m., I heard the crunching again. I went to the window, hand trembling, and saw her closer than ever before, 5 feet away now. I could see the texture of her coat, the dirt under her fingernails, the faint discoloration on her collar that looked like dried blood. Her mouth hung open wider this time. She was breathing, slow and deep, and I realized her eyes weren't focused on my window. They were focused through it. It felt like she was staring directly into my room, into me. When I whispered, "What do you want?" her head tilted slightly, but she didn't answer. She stayed there until sunrise. The next morning, I spoke to the site foreman, Vicens, a rugged man who always had dust in his beard and caffeine in his hand. He frowned when I described her. "Lady like that's been hanging around a few of the lots. Thought she was one of the old realtors. You know how they get. Show up, snoop around, try to get listings again." One of the younger workers spoke up. "Yeah, man. We've been finding weird crap lately. Food wrappers in the houses, muddy footprints on the porta-johns, like someone's living out here." That's when my stomach dropped. Someone living out here? In these half-built houses? By Friday, I decided to set up a camera. I angled my laptop at the window, hit record, and left the lights off. She came earlier that night. Around 11:20 p.m., her shape emerged from the darkness. The same coat, the same deliberate walk. But this time, she didn't stop at the fence. She came straight to the window until her face was inches from the glass, her hands pressed flat against it. Her mouth opened and began moving. Not words, just slow, wet, chewing motions. It was the sound that got me, not the sight of her. That sound, like something slick being stirred. A tongue working against teeth. She did that for 6 hours. When she finally left, there was a long smear of saliva across the glass. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I watched the video. It captured everything. The footsteps, the breathing, the woman's face, pale and expressionless, pressed against the window. When I tried to email it to the police, the file showed up corrupted. Static, garbled frames. Even when I uploaded it to the cloud, it vanished. The police didn't believe me. I checked into a cheap motel off Route 13, but couldn't shake the feeling she knew I was gone. That night, I dreamed of gravel shifting outside the motel window. By Sunday, my nerves were shot. I needed answers. So I drove back to Willow Creek after dark, parked a block away, moved through the half-built houses, careful not to make noise. The air smelled like wet plywood and dust. Every unfinished frame looked like a skeleton reaching into the sky. I waited behind a stack of lumber facing my house. At midnight exactly, she appeared. But she didn't come from the road. She crawled out from the half-finished house behind mine, through the window frame, slow and quiet, as if she'd been inside for days. She didn't even look around. She walked straight to my door and began checking the locks, the window frames, running her fingers across them like she was memorizing every inch. I lifted my phone and started recording. That's when I saw it, hanging from her coat pocket, a realtor's lockbox key. The police found her the next day, not wandering the neighborhood, but living in the basement of the unfinished house behind mine. Her name was Margaret Fields, a former real estate agent who had lost her license 2 years ago for entering homes without permission. She'd been moving from construction site to construction site, living in empty homes before they were finished. Inside that basement, they found boxes filled with photos, pictures of me sleeping, cooking, brushing my teeth, all taken through my windows. She had written notes on every one. He forgets to lock the side window. Sleeps at 2:15 a.m. on his left side. Alarm clock, kitchen counter. There were pages of observations about every family in the development. When the police let her out, she didn't resist. She just kept that slow chewing motion, her lips barely parting, eyes locked on my face. And as she passed, she whispered, "You shouldn't leave your upstairs window open. It clicks when it shuts." They said later she'd been inside my house twice. Standing in the hallway while I slept. I broke my lease that week, moved to a different town, different state, different everything. But sometimes, around 2:15 a.m., I still wake up to the sound of gravel crunching outside my window, and I don't dare look. It started on a quiet Sunday morning, a few weeks after my roommate Jenna and I moved into a rental house just outside of Springfield, Illinois. We were both 22, broke, and trying to save money while finishing up our degrees. When we found a 2-bedroom house listed for almost half the usual rent, it felt like we'd hit the jackpot. The place wasn't perfect. Old beige siding, cracked porch steps, and a smell of damp wood that lingered no matter how many candles we burned. But it was ours. The landlord, a gray-haired man named Mr. Callahan, gave us a quick tour, mumbling something about old wiring and "Don't worry if you hear the pipes knocking." He didn't stay long. I remember asking if the house had a basement, and he just said, "Not exactly," before handing me the keys and driving off. At the time, that answer didn't bother me. But later, I'd realize what he meant. For the first couple of weeks, everything was fine. We decorated, unpacked, and laughed at how the floors tilted enough that marbles would roll on their own. But there was always this weird smell near the laundry room, something between dust and something faintly organic. Jenna said it was probably moisture from the old washer. She was always braver about stuff like that. One Saturday morning, she decided to pull the washing machine away from the wall to clean behind it. It took both of us pushing and swearing for 5 solid minutes before the machine finally budged. Behind it, there was a patch of wall that looked newer, painted over with a slightly lighter color than the rest. And in the middle of that patch, we saw it. A small metal latch holding a square panel about 2 feet wide. Jenna squatted down, tapping it with her knuckle. "Hollow," she said. And she was right. When she pressed her ear against it, the sound came back faint and empty, like there was space inside. There was also a tiny padlock, rusted, but still locked. I wanted to leave it alone. But Jenna, of course, ran to the kitchen, grabbed a screwdriver, and started prying at the latch while I held my phone flashlight. The lock gave out with a metallic snap. A rush of cold, stale air drifted out, smelling faintly of mildew and something old. She pulled the panel off, and we both leaned in. The beam of light cut through a narrow crawl space that extended further than we could see. It wasn't tall enough to stand in, just a dark, horizontal tunnel lined with wooden beams and insulation. And about 5 feet in, the light landed on what looked like a pile of fabric. At first we thought it was insulation or maybe an old blanket. Then Jenna whispered, "Wait, that's a pillow." I leaned closer and felt my stomach twist. The fabric wasn't dusty. The pillow had an indentation, like someone had just lifted their head off it. Jenna reached her arm in, brushing her fingers against the blanket. Then she froze. "It's warm," she said quietly. That word hit me like a slap. Warm? That crawl space was freezing. I told her to stop, but she shook her head, shining the flashlight deeper. There were other things too. An empty water bottle, a crumpled fast food bag, a pack of batteries, and what looked like a small radio missing its antenna. None of it looked old. Jenna whispered, "Someone's been living in there." We both backed away, hearts pounding. The open crawl space seemed to breathe, like the house had exhaled after being caught. We called the police right away. 2 officers arrived about 20 minutes later. A man and a woman, both clearly unimpressed by our story. They crawled halfway in, shined their lights, and came back with a grim expression. "There's a sleeping bag, some food wrappers, and a backpack," one said. "Probably a transient using this for shelter." That explanation should have been comforting, but it wasn't. He added, "You're lucky you didn't go in there yourself." Whoever it was might still be hanging around. They took some photos, said they'd patrol the area, and left. That night, we tried to sleep, but every creak and groan of the house felt amplified. Around 2 a.m., I heard a soft thump from the laundry room. I told myself it was just the wind, but then came another. A scraping sound. Slow. Steady. I stared at my ceiling for an hour, gripping my phone like a weapon, until I finally drifted off around dawn. The next evening, Jenna and I stayed up late watching TV in the living room, trying to pretend everything was fine. Around midnight, she went to her room. 10 minutes later, I heard her whisper my name. Her voice was tight, barely audible. I ran to her doorway. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at her window. The curtain was moving, not fluttering like from wind, but shifting, slow and deliberate. Then came the faintest sound, like fingertips brushing the glass. We stood frozen, listening to the scrape of something sliding away, followed by the crunch of footsteps fading toward the backyard. When the police came again, they found prints in the dirt near the laundry wall, fresh ones, heavy, boot-shaped. We didn't sleep that night. The crawl space panel was still open. The officers had told us to leave it like that in case whoever it was returned. But that just made it worse. Every gust of wind felt like breath coming from inside the wall. At 3:12 a.m., a soft hum started, faint, like static from a radio. I followed the sound. It was coming from the laundry room, the little radio they'd found earlier. It was on. No one had touched it. I remember whispering Jenna's name, but when I looked at her, she was already staring at the same dark opening, pale and trembling. Then, the hum cut out. Silence. A long, heavy silence that felt like the whole house was listening back. The next morning we started packing. Mr. Callahan didn't even look surprised when we told him what happened. He just sighed, rubbed his temples, and said, "You should have called me first." Happens sometimes. These old places. You never really know who's been inside them. He refunded half the month's rent and told us we could leave the keys in the mailbox. By the afternoon, we were loading our last boxes into Jenna's car. The crawlspace panel was still open, the hollow behind it swallowing the light. But before leaving, I noticed something. A new blanket, folded neatly just inside the opening. Blue, like the first one. That blanket hadn't been there the night before. A few weeks later, I got a call from a detective. He told me they'd gone back after another neighbor reported strange noises. Under the house, they found signs of multiple living areas. Makeshift shelves, candle stubs, piles of clothes. And deeper under the kitchen floor, a small wooden hatch that opened into a dugout chamber, almost like a hidden room. Inside were jars of water, food, and a stack of notebooks. each one filled with cramped handwriting. The notes described the people who had lived there before us, what time they left for work, what they watched on TV, what they said on the phone. The last pages were about us. The short one sleeps with music on. The other leaves the bathroom light off at night. They don't hear me when I crawl under the vent. The detective said whoever wrote them was still out there. No fingerprints, no ID, no clue how long they'd been staying under that house. It's been 3 years since then. I live in a new apartment now, downtown, where the only noise is traffic and sirens. But sometimes, when the washing machine starts its cycle and the pipes begin to rattle, I still catch myself listening too closely, just in case. Because somewhere under that sound, faint and rhythmic, I swear I can still hear it. That same slow, scraping noise, moving just beneath the floorboards. So why does that feeling hit us so hard? Because some houses don't forget. They remember the people who lived there before, the routines, the small habits. And sometimes, whatever was left behind keeps watching. That's the reason you'll hear again by the end of this video. Stick around. I still remember the day we found the listing. A beautiful 2-story suburban home, freshly painted white walls, black trimmed windows, a small porch, and a big oak tree out front. It felt like a dream. After years of cramped apartments and noisy neighbors, this place looked like the peace we were desperate for. My wife, Emily, was smiling for the first time in months. She kept saying, "This is it, Mark. This feels like home." We moved in during early spring. The air was crisp, the grass smelled fresh, and every room echoed with emptiness. That kind of emptiness that's both peaceful and unsettling. That night, after unpacking half our boxes, we crashed on the couch. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a faint creaking sound, like someone slowly walking above us. At first, I brushed it off as the wood settling. Old houses do that, right? But when I went upstairs, it felt colder. There was this faint smell, like old dust mixed with something sour. I checked every room. Nothing. When I came back down, Emily was sitting up on the couch. She said, "I thought you were still up there. I heard you walking around." But I hadn't been. Over the next few days, little things started happening. Objects moved from where we left them. Not in obvious ways, just slightly off. The salt shaker that was on the counter would be on the other side in the morning. The living room curtains, I'd find them open when we always kept them closed. Emily joked that maybe we had a house ghost, but I wasn't laughing. Then one morning, I went out to the garage and noticed something strange. An old wooden chair sitting directly under the attic hatch. I didn't remember putting it there. The attic door was one of those pull-down types with a cord. Out of curiosity, I tugged it open. The stairs creaked down, releasing a gust of warm, stale air. I climbed halfway up and shone my phone's flashlight. Nothing. Just insulation, boxes, and shadows. But when I looked to the far corner, I saw something that froze me. A small blanket, a few empty water bottles, a half-eaten granola bar. Someone had been staying up there. My first instinct was that maybe the old owner had left stuff behind. But the granola bar wrapper, it was new. The expiration date was this year. I went back down slowly, closed the hatch, and tried to play it off when Emily asked what I was doing. I didn't want to scare her. That night, though, I barely slept. I kept hearing faint shifting sounds, like fabric rustling above the ceiling. 2 nights later, Emily screamed from the kitchen. I ran in and found her staring at the ceiling vent. "Mark, I swear I saw something move up there." The vent was small, not even big enough for a person to look through. But when I climbed on a chair and peered in with a flashlight, I saw the glint of something metal. A nail clipper. A human nail clipper. It shouldn't have been there. That was the moment I decided to call the police. They came, checked the attic. Nothing. No one there. Just a pile of old insulation and dust. The officer shrugged, said maybe a raccoon or someone squatting who already left. We tried to believe that. But deep down, I knew they were wrong. A week later, I was in the garage fixing a shelf when I noticed something strange about the ceiling. A rectangular cut that looked like drywall had been patched. It was slightly off color, like it had been done recently. I pulled out a ladder and pushed on the panel. It gave way. Behind it was a narrow crawl space, and inside it, a sleeping bag, canned food, a small battery lamp, and piles of old newspapers. Someone was living there. Someone who had been here long before we moved in. I called Emily. She came running, and when she saw the inside, she just whispered, "Oh my God, Mark, what if they're still here?" That night, we stayed up, every light on, waiting. I kept a baseball bat by the couch. At around 3:14 a.m., there was a soft creak above us, followed by slow, dragging footsteps. Emily gripped my hand. I climbed the stairs as quietly as I could. Every step felt heavier, the air thicker. When I reached the attic hatch, it was slightly ajar. Someone had opened it. I pulled it down slowly, and for a moment, I saw a shadow move inside. Just a shape, hunched, human-sized, retreating into the far corner. My voice cracked when I shouted, "Get out of my house!" There was silence. Then, a whisper. Soft, feminine. "I live here too." When the police arrived this time, they found signs of movement, fresh footprints in the insulation, a small corner where the dust had been brushed away, and a piece of fabric torn from a shirt. But no person. They said they'd do extra patrols around the area, but nothing came of it. We changed the locks, installed cameras, even sealed the attic. For a few days, things were quiet. Then one morning, we found something outside our bedroom door, a note written on torn cardboard. It said, "You shouldn't have locked me out." We didn't stay another day. By noon, we packed our things and left. When the new homeowners moved in a few months later, the realtor called me. He sounded uneasy. He said, "Mr. Henson, just out of curiosity, did you ever go back into the attic?" I told him no. He sighed. "Well, we found something strange up there. A mattress, and on the wall, written in black marker," he paused. It said, "Welcome back. We thought we bought our dream home." But someone had already made it theirs. And maybe they never left. When I first saw the house, it felt wrong. Not terrifying, just too good for the price. 2 floors, a white-painted porch wide enough for a swing, a little garden out front, and a "for sale" sign that looked like it had been sitting there forever. It was the kind of place people called charming, even when the paint peeled and the floorboards groaned. My girlfriend, Hannah, was obsessed the moment we stepped inside. She said, "It's perfect, Drew. We can make this our forever home." I just saw cracks in the ceiling and the faint smell of something old and wet, like rainwater trapped in the walls. Still, we signed the papers a week later. A fresh start, a place of our own. We moved in on a Wednesday with a rented truck, leftover pizza, and far too much excitement. By Thursday, we had already started exploring every corner of the place. That's when we found the door upstairs. The second floor had 3 doors in a narrow hallway: our bedroom, a small bathroom, and the third one. It wasn't just locked, it was sealed. Thick metal bolts ran across the frame, rusted and uneven, like someone had done it in a hurry. Whoever had sealed it hadn't wanted anyone to open it again. Hannah thought maybe it was a renovation thing, a mold problem, or structural damage. But I remember saying, or maybe it's haunted. She rolled her eyes, but even then, I felt something heavy behind that door. It took us nearly an hour to get it open. The wood whined like it hadn't moved in decades. And when the final bolt came free, a wave of hot, stale air poured out, thick and sour, like something that had been trapped for years. Inside was a tiny square room. No furniture, no dust, just walls covered in pale blue wallpaper with faded clouds printed across it. It looked like a child's room, freshly sealed, as if someone wanted it forgotten. In one corner, plugged into an outlet, was a baby monitor, a small white box with a red light blinking faintly. It shouldn't have been on. Hannah unplugged it immediately, muttering that it was creepy. She tossed it on top of our dresser and said we'd deal with it later. We didn't talk much about that room again. Not until that night. Around 2:30 a.m., I woke up to a low hiss, the kind you instantly recognize if you've ever used a baby monitor. Static. I looked across the room. The monitor we'd unplugged was glowing again. The red light pulsed softly in the dark. "Hannah," I whispered, shaking her awake. She groaned. "What?" I pointed. She sat up, staring at the monitor like it was a wild animal about to move. "I didn't plug that back in," she said. Neither did I. I got up, checked the cord. It was twisted and bent from when she'd yanked it earlier. The outlet was empty. It wasn't plugged into anything. And still, that little red light kept glowing. We didn't say a word after that, just stared until I finally threw a blanket over it and went back to bed. Neither of us slept much. For the next few days, I tried to ignore it. We painted the kitchen, fixed the gutters, replaced a few broken tiles. But every time the floor creaked upstairs, I found myself glancing toward that hallway. The sealed room stayed open, untouched, but I could swear it smelled different now. Sweeter somehow, like baby lotion, and something rotten beneath it. One afternoon, Hannah called me from upstairs. Her voice was calm, but her tone had that tremble you only hear when someone's trying not to panic. "Drew, come here." When I reached the bedroom, she pointed to the dresser. The baby monitor was flashing green now, the signal light that meant it was picking up sound. Only there was no transmitter. We had left that one downstairs in a box. A faint whisper came through the speaker, soft, choppy static like breathing, then a crackle, and what sounded like a single giggle. Hannah unplugged it again, tossed it onto the porch, and slammed the door. That night, the house felt too still. Every creak, every groan of wood sounded closer than it should. Around midnight, I woke to faint static again, the same low hiss, but not from the porch this time. It was coming from inside the walls. I pressed my ear against the drywall and heard something underneath the noise. A rhythm, like slow, shallow breathing. The sound moved from the corner of the room to the floorboards under our bed. Hannah whispered, "Please tell me that's the pipes." It wasn't. The next morning, we decided to seal the blue room again. I borrowed a drill from the neighbor, re-bolted the door shut, and painted over the edges. Before closing it, though, I noticed something new. The wallpaper was peeling slightly at the bottom. Underneath were faint crayon drawings, stick figures, circles, stars. And above them, in childlike handwriting, one word: don't. For a few days, things went quiet. We started to relax again. Then one evening, while Hannah was showering, I heard something coming from upstairs. A soft squeak, rhythmic and slow, like a cradle rocking. I froze. We didn't have any furniture like that. When I went up, everything was still. But the bolts on the sealed door were loose. One of them hung halfway out of the frame, spinning gently like someone had turned it from the inside. I tightened them again, hands shaking, and told Hannah it was nothing. She didn't believe me, but we both pretended. A week later, I came home late from work. The house was dark, except for a small glow upstairs. When I walked into our bedroom, Hannah was sitting on the bed, pale and silent. Her eyes were fixed on the dresser. There it was again, the baby monitor. Same shape, same scuffed casing, but we had thrown it away days ago. The red light blinked. Once, twice, then steady. Static filled the room, but this time it wasn't random noise. It was words. Faint, broken, but clear enough to make my stomach twist. "Why'd you lock me in?" I ripped the cord from the wall, grabbed the thing, and ran outside. I threw it in the trash bin, slammed the lid, and didn't sleep a single minute that night. 3 weeks later, we sold the house. Didn't even wait for the price to go up. We packed everything, left the blue room sealed, and never looked back. A month after we moved out, I got a call from the real estate agent. He laughed nervously and said, "Hey, Drew, weird question, but did you guys leave a baby monitor behind?" I said, "No." "Why?" He paused. "Because the new owners found one sitting on their bedroom dresser, and it's on." He tried to laugh it off, but I could hear it in his voice. That same uneasy tone I used to have when I still heard the static. Sometimes, late at night, I still think I can hear it. That faint hiss, like something small breathing through the walls, waiting for me to listen again. We thought we were building a home, but some rooms aren't meant to be opened. Some voices aren't meant to be heard. All right, here's the truth I promised. Why do new house stories feel so different? Like the walls themselves are holding a grudge. Because houses collect lives. Every footstep, every argument, every laugh, and every secret leaves a mark. Not just on paint and floorboards, but in the way the house expects things to be. When strangers move in, those expectations don't vanish. Sometimes a person stays behind in those expectations, watching, learning the routines, clinging to what used to be theirs. So it's not only memory, it's habit, and habit can turn into obsession. That's why some homes don't want to let go. They become full of someone else's waiting. If you got chills, tell me in the comments. Did you guess that? And if you've ever felt watched in a house, share it below. I read every one.